Hello everyone. We are in Parak 2, Mishnah 16 of Pirkei Avot. We're almost towards the end of the Parak, which is very exciting. And here we go. So first, just as a quick intro, again, over the past several weeks, we've been seeing the teachings of the students, the disciples, the Talmidim of Rabbeinu Yochanan ben Zakkai. We are now on the fifth and final one, Rabbi Elazar. So here it goes. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Heve shakud lilmod Torah, be diligent in the study of Torah and the learning of Torah. Apikores, so know how to respond to an Apikores, that is translated perhaps as a heretic. Find someone who has certainly whose beliefs about Judaism are seriously problematic. And know before whom you toil. And trustworthy is like the master of your labor, your employer, to pay you the wages of your work. That is the Mishnah. Now, what exactly does it mean? How do we understand this? Well, we'll be looking at least three Mefarshim today. There's a lot to say about this topic. And here we go. First, we'll actually start with Alei Shor, Rav Volbe. In volume 1, page 100, he cites this Mishnah and he says something very powerful. He says it's important to remember, Rabbi Elazar Omer, this isn't the first time we've seen him. He actually teaches us something else. Namely, several Mishnahs ago, we saw the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked them, what is the straight path that a person should cleave to? And what do we see? Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, or Rabbi Elazar Omer, Lev Tov, a good heart. A good heart is important. Now we have to understand, well, how does this teaching here in our Mishnah relate to that Lev Tov? Hevi shakud lilmod Torah. So that's obvious. Know how to respond to an Apikores. Why is that so important to have a Lev Tov? So says Alei Shor, that's because heresies constitute a blockage of the heart. And as such, the heart is not working at full capacity. Think of typical heretical statements like God doesn't exist. Even if he does, he doesn't care about anything you do, or at least, it's only about the super important things, not about the minutiae of your day-to-day. That's knowing how to respond to these issues, knowing the truth behind these issues is absolutely critical. Even if a person is determined to act like a good person who actually does feel morally obligated, knowing how to respond to does God exist? And even if one does believe that he exists, why should he care about the way we eat? At the end of the day, shovel the food into my mouth. What difference does it make? What difference does it make if I'm giving charity? Then okay, maybe I'll maybe not look so happy about it. Nothing to do with the giving of charity. Maybe I'm just in a bad mood. So, and of course, obviously with more important decisions like business decisions, people are very happy to be religious when it comes to their own personal things. When it comes to business matters, that's my own sphere. I'm not going to let my religion affect that. So this is a big deal. But again, even a person who is dedicated to being a morally upstanding individual, listen to how Rabbi Tatz articulates how important it is to get this clarified. It's very powerful. So in Letters to a Buddhist Jew, this is literally the first thing he talks about. It's page 2021. So David Gottlieb says, Zen Buddhism does not deny the existence of a divine force at work in the universe. And so Rabbi Tatz responds to this, and he's like, David, what exactly is the meaning of does not deny? And he skipping along. If, however, does not deny means it simply has no interest in, we are faced with a logical problem. There cannot conceivably be anything more important than the existence of God. In the light of God's existence, literally everything takes on vastly greater proportions. Not only do moral obligations, for example, take on meaning in the deepest sense, but the very notion of meaning itself comes to life. In a godless universe, does anything really matter? Surely this is the first point to clarify. Nothing could possibly change the shape of all other issues more. This is not a matter for simply not denying. If one comes to the conclusion that the universe has a conscious creator and master, all one's investigations and subsequent conclusions will be radically different in the deepest way. And if one comes to the opposite conclusion, then quite frankly, for me on a personal level, the discussion loses most of its flavor. If nothing transcends the world of our finite experience, there can be nothing really worth striving for. Certainly strive if you wish, work if you will, but compared to the absolute alternative, any other project tastes flat to me. So I think this is a very beautiful way of articulating it. In the light of God's existence, literally everything takes on vastly greater proportions. Not only do obligations, for example, take on meaning in the deepest sense, etc. Moral obligations are no longer, okay, it's nice for me to do, it's an elevated, upstanding, morally correct way of acting. No, this is an absolute requirement that requires our deepest, most serious attention. So that's point number one. That the Alei Shor states is a requirement in order to get a lev tov. We need to remove these blockages from our heart, because the more we realize how important these issues are, then we can proceed with our avoda. So moving on from there to Rabbeinu Yonah, a Rishon, he says something very powerful. He says, "V'dal lifnei mi ata amel." What's that about, right? "V'dal lifnei mi ata amel." We should know before whom we toil. Why? So Rabbeinu Yonah says, because it's needed when debating with the Apikores. Do not let him oil you up, says Rabbeinu Yonah, so that you end up believing him. Now this is a very critical perspective, because it's important to realize that when we think of like non-Jewish philosophy, sometimes, especially the deeper we get into Torah, we can look at disdain with these perspectives, but it's important to realize that these are sophisticated, well thought out, nuanced perspectives. And a person who goes in expecting to flatten the person they're dealing with, assuming they're knowledgeable in these matters, may get a very rude awakening. And so that's why Rabbeinu Yonah warns. First, learn Torah. Torah. That's step one. You need to know what you're talking about before you can engage in any debates, before you can have any guarantee whatsoever that you'll be able to withstand the onslaught of their perspective. So first, know Torah, and as you're debating, be aware of before whom you toil, so that you don't get affected by these debates. Fine. Moving on to Maharal. Maharal also picks up the very similar theme about, or another theme about this, V'damish tashiv lapikores. So both Maharal and Rabbeinu Yonah say that part of learning Torah is to know how to respond to the Apikores. It's not only learning, which is critical, but also we now have fuel for to debate with that, to debate them with. No learning, then you can't give any substantive answers. And finally, this is a final idea of So Rabbeinu Yonah says, if we don't respond to their claims and lies, then the world will learn, and the world will drink of this person's evil waters when they see him emerge victorious, which is again very powerful and very true. We see this today. We see that there are certain lies and quite frankly some just ridiculous perspectives that are being taken up by the world, and either those who are fighting against them are being silenced or mocked, and it's very difficult, even though popular ideologies might be patently absurd, the more they are propagated and the less they are contested, then the more people might think, especially the next generation, might think this is normal because that's what they grew up with. And so Rabbeinu Yonah says we have to respond to their claims and lies, because if we don't, then these lies are just going to spread. And Maharal says, he phrases this beautifully. He says, "V'amar achar kach shetiyeh torato k'dei sheyashiv lapikoros." Klomar, that is to say, שכמו שיש מצווה שילמד האדם ויקנה תורה שהיא תורת אמת, that just as there are mitzvahs that a person should learn, and he should acquire Torah, which is the Torah of truth, כך ראוי הוא לבטל דעת השקר מן העולם, כדי שיתגדל האמת בעולם. So too it is important to cancel, to destroy false thoughts from the world, so that in doing so, the truth will spread. Effectively, by reducing the space for falsehood, you will now increase the room for truth. And this says, "Shim yanech hasheker leolam, sof sheyasheker chas v'chalila me'abed et ha'emet." Right? Because if you let truth grow and sprout, then chas v'shalom, but it'll then start me'abed. It'll destroy the truth. It'll cancel the truth. Because the sheker will become stronger in the world. ולכך הזהיר שאל ייתן מקום אל השקר רק ידע מה שישב לאפיקורוס. Now the person should be careful that he should not give space for falsehood, and this is where I'm not entirely clear with Maharal is saying. He says רק ידע מה שישב לאפיקורוס. Does he mean a person should just know, as long as we have to know how to respond to these claims ourselves and therefore be strong internally? Or is he saying you have to go combat externally? It sounds more like the former than the latter, but I'm willing to leave it as an open question. Fine. And then, finally, last point. Says the Maharal. This does not contradict our third mission in the first parak. Namely, what does that say? It says, Antigonus ish socho kibel mishimon tzadik. Hu haya omer, אל תהיו עבדים המשמשים את הרב על מנת לקבל פרס. Do not be like servants who are serving their master in order to receive a reward. אלא הבו כעבדים המשמשים את הרב שלא על מנת לקבל פרס. Rather, be like servants who serve their master not to get a reward. Now, this is very important to articulate, and the fact that the Maharal does so is such a beautiful point. It's so relevant, where he says like this. We'll say it outside and then we'll look at it inside. He says a person could often think that sometimes avoda is very difficult and we have a hard time incentivizing ourselves to go and do it. We're tired, we're busy, we're not in the mood. Anyone with like a dozen different types of excuses to not go and do that mitzvah, to go learn, to go do a chesed for somebody else. All these excuses and all these reasons. So what the Maharal is saying, when a person thinks, but it's really chashuv and I'm building my olam haba and I'm going to get reward for this, says the Maharal, that's not serving for reward. That's called an incentive. It's helping us get going and get started. Says the Maharal, ואם מעורר את עצמו על ידי שיחשוב בשכר הגדול שיש לאדם, לא נקרא שהוא עובד על מנת לקבל פרס. If a person awakens himself and that he starts thinking with the great reward he'll get, that's not called working al menat lekabel pras. That's not called working in order to get a reward. כיוון שאין זה רק התעוררות, שלא יימנע מן העבודה. It's just again, it's incentivizing. It's getting you to get up and do it so that a person doesn't prevent himself from doing his avoda. Sometimes it's like, what's the point of doing this? What's the point? This amazing reward you're going to get. Fine, fair enough. Okay, fine, I'll go do it. It's not doing it for the reward, it's just helping him get up on his feet. And we'll end there. This is a very powerful, relevant idea, and we'll see you next time.